Hello, this is Rev Dore Atheism, teaching religious science from beautiful Sarasota, Florida, which is in our tiny little fall where the temperature plummets all the way to 80 degrees. It's lovely out there today. Today we want to talk about what it's like to be an atheist. You know, I often ask myself what it would be like to be an atheist. I'm a person of faith, so I've never experienced it. But I was exposed to many people as a child who rejected any concept of deity. You see, I grew up in Southern California, in Los Angeles, in an area called Sherman Oaks, which is in the San Fernando Valley. Now, Sherman Oaks had probably 60% Jewish population, many of them in the motion picture industry and in the record industry. And that's where we lived, just at the beginning of the foothills. The ones that lived the higher up had the bigger houses. Our family had several atheist friends, and they were mostly Jews who no longer practiced Judaism, which is a very common thing in Southern California. I would quiz them at Thanksgiving dinner about what it felt like to have no power greater than themselves. Now, Mom told me this was not appropriate dinner conversation and I should never do it, but I did it anyway. I spent several days on restriction for that one, but it was worth it. Our atheist friend's answer was usually that their higher power was reason, logic, and the human mind. They were secular humanists and believed that all truth was knowable by reason, logic, and science. They were also empiricists. And that means if you couldn't see it, touch it, hear it, taste it, smell it, or measure it in a laboratory, then they felt it was fantasy and foolishness. In essence, it seems like they had replaced God with science as their great power. Transferred their faith from the faith of their fathers, which they couldn't believe in, to science. And one fellow who worked in the aerospace industry said to me over dinner, he said, "Science will be the savior of mankind, young man." And they all pretty much agreed around the table. These very bright and interesting men and women would assure me that science was the way. I did get into a lot of trouble one night when they were over for a little party when I asked one of that same scientist how the hydrogen bomb, which was just invented by scientists at the Los Alamos Nuclear Laboratory, was going to save humanity. I opined that it was more likely going to end it. I must have been a real handful to raise. The older I got, the more I realized what my mother and father went through in raising me. I did get a little more restriction because of that one. Being a smart, wasn't an acceptable thing in our house. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for all you did for me. This incident made me wonder, however, if I was missing something. You see, our friends were mostly movie industry executives, academics, aerospace executives and engineers, teachers, writers, script writers, screenwriters, novel writers. They were among the intelligentsia of Southern California. Yes, there is intelligent life west of the Hudson, you folks back there in New York who think that we're still fighting the Indians or something. Maybe they knew something that my child's mind just couldn't grasp. They all lived really well. They lived further up the hill than I did. And they had real nice houses and lots of money and good careers. Maybe I ought to look into this atheist thing. But you know, the more I thought about the whole idea, the more I realized that if I were an atheist, I would feel so very alone. Because I'd always felt that there was a power and a presence within me that I could use. Believing that there's nothing greater or finer than me was a pretty depressing proposition to consider at my tender age, so I just let it go. The idea that this is all there is, that there's no bright light, no afterlife, no family to guide me to the other side, as my very southern grandmother had promised me. What must that be like? Is it just lights out and it's over? I did notice that some of the atheists we knew and socialized with were often angry and very cynical about life in the world. Perhaps that was because they were alone in their minds. They had no power and presence in there but their own intellect. They were, in effect, in a closed system, being a lamp unto themselves. They seemed to look around and see misery, war, genocide, natural disasters. If there was something wrong, they'd find it in a minute. And think, is this all there is? What's the point? Where is the meaning in a world of such evil? Or is there even any meaning? I rarely heard expressions of hope or optimism expressed by these very bright and very successful men and women. but did hear endless parsing of the human condition. Even at the age of 8, that seemed to me to be a rather sad way to live. How can you go through a day without faith in something, or at least a little hope? What if I find out on my last hour on earth that everything I believe is a bunch of rubbish? Then what? Then when I'm asked me that question, okay, you have faith. What if you find out it's a bunch of garbage? And what are you going to do? Will I feel foolish, or will I feel betrayed? No, I'm going to realize that faith does the work, not the object of the faith. If religious science turns out to be a bunch of hooey, which I'm just about certain it won't, because it's the thread of truth that runs through every great religion, I'm going to still realize that hope springs eternal for most people for a reason. It's the projection of what we cherish, desire, and want into our future. And without it, we live in a purgatory of disappointment, anger, and regret. If you're not hoping or wishing or dreaming about something in the future, why live? Now, hope is a pretty weak reed to lean on, but it's much better than hopelessness. The thing you want to do if you really want to create the future you want is to know it, believe it, and live in the end as if it's already done. Believing only in what can be sensed or known intellectually, atheists seem to perceive only the effects of the world, and they don't ever seem to seek or understand the cause behind it. They see things on the surface, and they ain't it awful all the time. They see terrible things, but they never figure out the higher reason for them or the good that comes from them, if one has eyes to see and ears to hear, as the master teacher said. Atheists that I have known, and as an academic, as teaching school, being an educator for most of my life, that's a lot of atheists, generally reject any notion of the creation of life except random chance and physical law. They seem to be big believers in luck. My goodness, must have heard luck in every sentence. Well, I wish you good luck, and good luck with that. I'm going to take a lot of luck to get that new job. They didn't know what or who created the universe. They didn't understand that there was a mind or a sentience behind it. So they had to believe that luck did it, or outside influences did it, or that's how their life was created. You really might feel like a stranger in a strange land if you believe that. You're at the whim of some outside forces all the time. Belief in nothing more than the self and in science seemed to me to be a very lonely and rather sad existence. Yeah, they were bright, nice people who laughed, drank, usually a lot, partied, and seemed to live the good life, but somehow had an aura of, is this all there is about them? They seemed like players condemned to speak parts in a very bad play. They spoke the lines, but really never took ownership of them. Most of them believed in nothing, but were critical of everything. Constant critics can be a real drag, especially on a daily basis. And as I grew, and our circle of humanists grew, because these were fun people in spite of their limited spiritual maturity, I became very glad that I'd been raised a religious scientist. I knew what they never allowed themselves to understand. The God they were raised in, which is the Old Testament tribal Jewish God, the Yahweh, is only one concept of the same power that is everywhere present. Tradition and ceremony is the heart of Judaism. It's a very traditional religion, and it's a beautiful religion. But if you don't like the ceremony, the tradition, and the old tribal God, find another one. God is however we conceive her to be. Deity is universal and all-encompassing. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We live and move and have our being within God. God is not out there somewhere. God is all around us and is us. I'm not the Alpha and the Omega. I'm not all there is. I'm just one expression of God. There is a power and presence in the universe, and its love and goodness and magnificence, and we can use its power, its love, and its life. We're part of that. We're expressions of the great mind, the ground of being, the universal intelligence that we nickname God, for lack of a better term. Some prefer spirit, the universe, whatever. It's all the same thing. You can call God Ethel or Fred, and it'll still warm your heart and light your soul just as brightly. It doesn't need praise. It has no ego. It exists to love each of its creations by creating all that exists from its very substance. Yes, we really do live our lives and think our thoughts within the great body of God. You know, we often see life inside out and upside down. We think God's up there in space somewhere, and actually we're in God. There's a thought for you. Whatever anyone tells you, you're never alone. Whatever anyone does to you, know that you're cherished beyond human understanding. There's a spirit with arms around you all the time if you just had the spiritual maturity to feel them and to know about them. Whatever you create in your life, whatever you do with your life, know that God is your co-creator, your best friend, and that God will love you until the end of time. God has known you before the beginning of time and shall know you into all eternity, because you are an eternal being having a short physical experience. You're totally safe, dear one. Nothing can hurt you. You want to know more about religious science and this glorious, empowering teaching and way of life? Why don't you log on to csl.org, and find the nearest Center for Spiritual Living. That's what we call our churches. And visit a Sunday celebration or sign up for one of our great classes. Don't forget to subscribe to this blog at wakeupandlive.net. That's my website, and all of these posts are on that website in writing with an audio version. Or you may want to log on to youtube.com, user REV DORE, and find a new faith, philosophy, and way of life. You know, we're a little bit like Outback. No rules, just right. Until we're together again. Bye-bye for now.